Awesome. Welcome. So we are going to hear from Caspar, Luke, and Yana on advancing decent work in circular economy. I know we touched a bit of this yesterday, but it was just like passing by. So once again, I invite you to listen through and to have some energy. Try not to close your eyes, because if you close your eyes, some things will pass. So Caspar and Luke and Yana to join us later. You are most welcome. Caspar is the head of unit for extractive energy and manufacturing at International Labour Organization. And Luke is a junior technical officer or a technical officer at the extractive energy and manufacturing as well at the International Labour Organization. Yana is going to join us later from the Circle Economy Foundation. So we are going to give you a chance to do your introductions and your presentations, and then you are going to engage as much as possible. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure being here today. And I wish you all well and send our warmest greetings from a very cold and gray Geneva today. My name is Caspar. I'm married to my wife Aino. I have 2 children, and I have worked for the ILO and for IFC for 23 years. We have, together with Julien, planned a session in 3 parts, where first we would like to have a conversation with you about the broader concept of the circular economy and decent work, and how we can ensure a just transition to a circular economy. Then we would like to dip into the issue of e-waste. And Luke is going to take the lead on that one also. And then finally, the third part is with Yana from our friends in the Circular Economy Foundation about jobs in the circular economy. So you're journalists, right? And therefore I expect critical questions. In fact, I would be disappointed if I end up talking all the time, because I have been in the ILO for so long that I'm getting tired of listening to my own voice. I would like to listen to your voices and have a real interaction and engagement on this topic. Let's keep this Chatham House rules. But of course, if you want to write anything about circular economy, I'll be happy to provide quotes. I'll be happy to provide background. We are a public international organization. We're part of the UN. We're here to support you and your work. You can contact us anytime. We want to support you. We want to work with you to make this world a better place. So, the lunch hour spot, or I should say the spot after lunch hour, right? That's known as the graveyard spot. Because that's where all the food have gone into our stomach, all the knowledge have gone into our heads before, and then our body naturally tells us, whoa, this is great, man. I have arrived, I have eaten. Now it's time to chill and relax, right? That's the graveyard spot. So what I will do, what I propose to do, is I would like to take you on a journey. Please join me on a journey to the world's largest graveyard for ships. I love ships. When I was a child in my country, Denmark, we would sometimes go down to the harbor and we would see when newly built ships were launched. In Denmark, we were still building ships back then. And sometimes the queen would be there and they would name the ship with champagne. And these proud ships would sail the seas. And in my country, there are legends of seafarers, the ships, the big container ships. One of our biggest companies is still a ship. So 5 years ago, I saw what happens to these ships when they come to the end of their life, when they die. Most of these ships, they are sailed halfway around the world to India, where with the last bit of fumes in the tank, they're beached, they're pushed on the beach. Around 90% of all the world's old, unsafe ships, they end up on the beaches in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, or in India. And there's one place in India that's bigger than them all. It's called Alam. It's only 200 kilometers north of Mumbai. Mumbai, it was called in the old day, but Mumbai, where you have the largest concentration of billionaires in India. You have the big Bollywood film industry. Just 200 kilometers north of that, you have the world's largest graveyards for ship. You might have seen the photos. They lie there, ship next to another ship, next to another ship, next to another ship. Sometimes there are more than 200 ships that are being broken. They are being cut up so that their parts can be reused, repurposed, or recycled. When you walk among these ghost ships before the sun sets, when the workers have gone home for the day, it's this eerie, spooky feeling. There's no fanfare, there's no ceremony. Whatever sense of achievement, of technological wonders is gone. All you see is rusty metal, the smell of chemicals, this weird sensation in the air. To talk about energy, this is a really weird energy. Made a huge impact on me. There are photographers, photojournalists who have documented this very powerfully, very brilliantly, and it's worth taking a look at. But you know what? That is the circular economy. Because 95% of these ships, 95% what is in these ships is being reused, repurposed, or recycled. These ships are built of the finest steel in the world, the most expensive steel. The world needs steel. So the fact that we reuse 95% of that steel is a great story of material reflows. And there's a whole economy around it. When you drive down to that graveyard in Alam, on the big road there, you see shop after shop after shop. One is selling lifeboats, another life vests, and shop is selling mirrors, another is selling cutlery from the cruise ships, mattresses, uniforms, everything you can imagine that was on this ship is being resold. There's a whole economy around it. More than 35,000 people work there and have a job. But the problem is, and this is one of the main takeaways today, the problem is that the circular economy is not in and for itself green. And the circular economy is not in and for itself fair. Because what happens before the ships are beached, the chemicals, the oil is dumped into the ocean. When the ships are taken apart, the asbestos, the paint, it all ends up in the sea or in landfills. It's bad for the environment. The circular economy is, as it happens in India. And even worse are the working conditions. 40-degree humid heat, workers without protective equipment or training, using electricity to cut up steel over water. You can imagine we are seeing a number of fatalities, injuries, and illnesses each year. And that's what I mean when I say the circular economy on that graveyard for ships is not fair, it's not just either. It's not what we in the ILO called decent work. So, yes, we want to accelerate the circular economy. We want to accelerate it as an alternative to the linear economy model where you take something from the ground, from the field, from the sea, you make something of it, you use it, and you throw it away. The linear economy is extremely wasteful. It's also not necessarily green, and it's certainly not always good for workers. But the circular economy, we want to accelerate that. Let's not make the mistakes of the linear economy. Let's not recycle the poor working conditions. Let's not recycle the inequalities of the linear economy when we accelerate the circular economy. Let's make the circular economy one that is just, one that has jobs, and one that is good for the planet. So how do we do that? Well, I think the first thing we have to recognize is decent work is not a new phenomenon. The circular economy is not a new phenomenon, is what I meant to say. Circular economy has been with us always. And it's with us today. In so many parts of our world today, people simply cannot afford to throw things away. When I lived and worked in Kathmandu in Nepal, we had projects to combat child labor, the worst forms of child labor. These kids that we work with, their families, they could not afford to throw plastic cups away or throw clothes away. Everything was repaired, repurposed, reused, or recycled. So in many, many countries and many communities around the world, to be circular or to go circular, as I sometimes hear, it's not a choice. It's a way of living. But it's something that has been largely forgotten as our countries have gotten richer. Hence, in many of our big cities around the world, when we're getting richer, when we're forgetting circularity, when we buy into the linear economy, we end up with tons of waste that we don't know what to do with. So the issue is not, as some proponents say, let's have more of the circular economy. What if we just make it better? The issue is that the circular economy today is in the informal sector, where people have low-paid, low-skilled jobs without any prospect for progressing in their livelihoods or in their lives. So what we argue in the ILO is that we need to embrace the circular economy as it exists in many countries today, in all of our communities, but we have to improve conditions for the entrepreneurs and for the workers in those sectors. And there are some excellent examples out there. In all of our meetings, we try to give space to young people, because young people are the future. We give space to young entrepreneurs. I remember in our last big event, we had a young entrepreneur from Nigeria who created a company that takes electronic waste, and we'll hear more about that later, one of the fastest growing waste streams, and converted the motherboards and components of that waste into solar-powered lanterns. In other words, she and her company was making light out of waste. There's some excellent examples, including from India, from that ship graveyard, where workers have organized, where they formed their first union, where they have negotiated for better and safer conditions and better wages. And then there are policymakers in all of our countries who are recognizing the importance of the circular economy to create jobs and to protect the planet. All across Africa, we are seeing a resurgence of a renaissance, I would say, of such policies. From South Africa to Ghana to Nigeria, Kenya, we are seeing some thoughtful and interesting policies coming out. The challenge now is to make sure that they become translated into action on the ground for the benefit of the planet and for the benefit of the people. Voila, that was a little bit of an introduction to the topic today. Circular economy and decent work, and how we need to ensure a just transition from the linear economy to the circular economy, from the informal economy to the formal economy. Luke has a presentation ready, I believe. Let me just, at this stage, ask you, in order to make it as informal and conversational as possible, do you have any questions or any remarks? Is there anything I've provoked at this point in time?
Anyone who has an intervention? Abuja, you want to intervene? Let me pass the mic for the purposes of clarity.
Thank you very much.
We are making an intervention, so give just a minute.
Now,
introduce yourself first.
My name is Joseph Abuja. I'm a journalist. I'm an environment journalist based in Kenya. Now, I just want to quote you, young people are the future. And I want to understand from your end, how are you, or how are they inculcated in the circular economy process vis-a-vis job creation and protection of the planet? Thank you.
Thank you. It's the key questions that policymakers are and employers and workers are facing around the world, because we live in this time of poly-crisis. We have the climate crisis, but we also have a youth employment crisis. Most countries, youth unemployment is twice as high as unemployment in the general population. And we are wasting such talent and such energy because our labor markets cannot cope with the influx of so many youth, so many young women and men. So most look for what they can find or become self-employed or entrepreneurs in many countries around this world. But let me give you a good example of how we can attract more people to the circular economy. And that's from a study we did in Nigeria 4 years ago, where our researcher went to Computer Village in Lagos. And in Computer Village is a whole ecosystem of ways to treat e-waste. So there are some 6,000 people working there on dealing with different kinds of waste, from air conditioners to refrigerators to laptops to stationary desktops. And these are very small shops, often 2, 3 men or women, mostly men. And young people come to Computer Village and become like an informal apprentice and work with the owner of that micro business for 3 years, pretty much for free. That's not good, but they are fed, they have a place to sleep, sometimes in the shop, sometimes in another place, and they learn the trade in the old-fashioned way. And then at the 3rd year, they are awarded a large sum of money so they can start their own business and employ more people. So this is a little bit how, in the Computer Village ecosystem in Lagos, in Nigeria, we are seeing that jobs are created through these informal apprenticeship systems for youth. Again, these are not the best jobs. They're not as decent as they should be. So our challenge there is to help formalize them and make these informal apprenticeship and skill systems formal, and make it easier in Nigeria for young people to set up and start up your own business. And we know it's possible because there are successful entrepreneurs out there, like the one I mentioned before, who created solar-powered lanterns from e-waste.
I have a question. So I'm happy you mentioned what young people are doing. And really, if you go to most of these African countries, the young ones who are being innovative, go into this circular economy, like environment or sector. But the issue is in the systems that they work, the countries, most countries' economic situation does not make it easy for them to even thrive, let alone provide these people who work for them a good working conditions. Yesterday we were talking about waste pickers in Ghana and how much they earn. It's very deplorable. Like, it's not enough to do anything. So what exactly can we do around this? That's what I want.
Thank you. It's a huge challenge. The problem is we're flying blind. Globally, regionally, and in most countries, we simply don't know how many work in the circular economy, and we don't know how many jobs could be created. So what we have is indeed, as you say, stories of what's happening today, but we don't have the data we need to inform policymakers. And Jana, who has just joined us, will speak to that later, I believe. Now, the challenges from transitioning to the linear to the circular economy are even greater than those you set out there, I'm afraid. Because let's imagine for a moment that North America, US and Canada, go circular. They decide to reuse their minerals to a much greater extent than they do today. That will actually lessen the demand for new minerals. And that could have a negative impact on demand for minerals from Africa, from Latin America, from some countries in Asia, and that could in turn reduce the number of jobs in mining. So the youth of Africa, hope of the continent of hope, are faced with huge challenges. The challenge of finding a job in the linear economy today, challenge of finding a job in the emerging circular economy, which furthermore could actually have a negative impact, regionally speaking, on Africa, on Latin America, and other regions. So what can we do? First of all, we need to find out what is going on at the global, the regional, the country, and even the local level. And then we do need roadmaps. We need them in terms of legislation or policies that are implemented in practice. Fortunately, there the ILO has what we call the guidelines for a just transition. And they are directly applicable to creating a vibrant circular economy that works for all. These policies has to take into account the need to create an enabling environment for a new generation of circular enterprises. It has to be easier to start and improve your own business than it is today. They also have to focus on the skills you need for the future economy, which will be circular. In addition to that, there will have to be a focus on conducive macroeconomic and trade policies. It's a great concern to me that as our world is going circular, it's also becoming more protectionist. We need to insist that yes, we protect jobs domestically, but that we keep an open economy. Then there has to be specific policies for specific industries where there can be more jobs generated in the circular economy. And then we urgently need to protect those who work in the circular economy today from the hazards they face, whether it's fumes or dust or chemicals. We need to step up our work on safety and health at work. And through all of this, we have to ensure that the circular economy becomes just and rights-based, with much greater attention to fundamental principles and rights at work. Because that's when we really start to empower people, including young people. And most of all, we should at all costs avoid creating a circular economy for young people or for some people. Hate it. Absolutely deplore it when people speak like that. What we can do together is to create a space for everybody to come to the table, those that are in the circular economy today, whether you're a worker, you're an entrepreneur, a policymaker, you're from an NGO, you're an academic, and together find solutions for the way forward. We need to give much more voice to those who are circular today, who have created a circular business, who are creating cooperatives or a social enterprise, and let them tell us how we can support them. Those are some of the elements that are contained in the ILO's guidelines on a just transition that I believe are directly applicable to ensuring a just transition to greater circularity. All right. With those words, I can see my colleague Luke is tripping to get in. Luke, why don't you run us through some of the important information you have in the presentation you put together for us?
Cheers.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
An intervention before Luke
Yes,
comes.
of course. Of course.
Luke, just a minute, and then we'll come back to you.
just a quick one. You shared your childhood memories of the stuff that goes to India. And here with the previous speakers, we are sharing on tracking substances of high concern. How are you guiding in your country and for Africa at large?
Could you just repeat that last bit of the question again? You just flipped out there for a second because of technical issues on my end.
About the substance that is flowing to India, you talked about.
Yes.
And then I want to know, because there is an element in circular economy
Yes.
of tracking high substances.
Yes.
How are you guiding to your country, and how are you giving it to Africa?
Yes. So there are two international frameworks at the moment to prevent the dumping of toxic and chemical waste. And that was largely in reaction to what began in the 70s, and we still see to this day that waste from high-income countries was dumped in low-income countries. And the NGO movements and environmentalists stood up to that and demanded action. So in the United Nations, we today have the Basel, Stockholm, and Rotterdam Conventions, a framework that protects against dumping of hazardous wastes, including substance of great concern. And then the European Union has enacted, for instance, the ship recycling regulation, which says that ships carrying European flags, they should be recycled in Europe or on a list of yards, on a list made by the European Commission, and that they should not be sent to India, to the other graveyards if they are filled with chemicals. I think both are extremely well intended and important, but I have problems with both. Because as we heard before, waste is also a resource. There's more silver in a ton of e-waste than there is in a ton of silver ore. And if we in Europe keep the ships for ourselves, first of all, we don't need the steel. We are a steel exporter already. We'll be creating jobs in Europe, that's great, but we will be destroying jobs in India. If we have to make the global economy truly circular, we also need to make sure that recycling waste or products can be moved freely around the world. So it's a very difficult balance. I am totally against dumping of toxic waste. I don't want barrels with chemicals sent to developing countries and left there to pollute the environment. But I do also not want flows of phones to be stopping from going to Lagos to Computer Village, because there's potentially 6,000 people there who overnight will lose their livelihood. That's also why we are engaging in this question of circular economy from the ILO, because we need to find truly global solutions. It starts at the local level, starts with the entrepreneurs, the workers, starts with governments and policymakers, but then we also have to find solutions across countries so that waste is not dumped, but that recycled materials can flow freely. Otherwise, the linear economy will always win. If we do not create as vibrant reverse supply chains as we have forward supply chains, the linear economy will always win.
Hello, I have a question. SMEs are playing a great role in the transition to circular economy. Now, for them, they have an issue with funding and the capital to start their businesses. Now,
Yes.
how can financial institutions come to their rescue now that most of them complain of going through tedious processes to look for that funding?
Yes, indeed. Here I have to put on my other hat, my old hat from when I worked for the International Finance Corporation. The International Finance Corporation is the international organization that provides financing to the private sector. And they provide upwards of $30 billion every year in financing, roughly half of it to banks, to national private banks, who then lend to entrepreneurs in all sectors of the economy. And then the rest is in special projects such as economic zones or private infrastructure and so on. So it is true that SMEs around the world are facing humongous problems, as you say. And I would add the M first. So it's the micro, small and medium enterprises around the world are facing huge challenges, red tape. What they want the most is access to finance, access to technology, access to skilled labor, and access to key markets. So there are many things that have to fall in place for these SMEs to thrive. Many years ago in a country like Nigeria, it was very difficult if you were a woman entrepreneur to go to your bank and get a loan, because you had no collateral if you did not have a land title in your name, and often the land title is in the name of the husband. Or there was just a general bias that women were not good businesswomen, whereas men were, which by the way has not proven true. But the IFC worked with the Central Bank of Nigeria and with the biggest banks in the countries to introduce credit lines of affordable credit and information and training to women entrepreneurs. And guess what? Their businesses grew faster than the men, and they repaid their loans at a higher rate more than men. So this is an example of how you can, with a collaboration with banks, with entrepreneurs, and international organizations, create a real change whereby a group of entrepreneurs can get access to capital they didn't have before. And it's that kind of access we need to create for both men and women entrepreneurs who are developing the innovative circular business models for the future. Look.
And I might just add a couple of short points to that too. So one of the
Hey,
issues with
Hey, look, sorry.
Yeah.
I think we are having quite a number of intervention and reactions from our side. We want to give Enrique a minute to also chip in.
Yeah, no hassle.
So, sorry, look, Casper, just a reaction to your point. My name is Enrique Passini, UNCTAD, fellow colleague in Geneva. Appreciate a lot the work of ILO in this area. What about when circularity becomes something dangerous for workers, right? Something hazardous. We're all proponents of circularity, but we need to be careful in some stances. For example, we have projects in Ghana, Nigeria, and many places which use machinery to reprocess, use plastics into new flakes so that they can being reinjected in the economic system. Those processes are dangerous. I mean, you work with contaminated plastics. There's heavy machinery that poses labor hazards when operating, rotary machines, blades, and so on. The same with resource recovery. So more circularity in a certain dimension requires more resource collection or secondary end-of-life resource collection. And we don't really want to stimulate unsafe trash picking and waste. So what is the take of ILO on that? How to make circularity safe? Thank you. I think your microphone is turned off, Casper.
Sorry, thank you very much for that question. So our work to improve the safety and health of those in the circular economy, to prevent accidents and injuries and illnesses in this sometimes hazardous line of work. That began where my intervention started. It began on that beach in India in 2003, where the ILO convened a meeting to discuss ways to address safety and health issues in ship breaking. And out of that meeting came the ILO's first manual on improving safety and health in ship recycling, which has been translated to 10 languages and is being rolled out and used across South Asia, where most of the ship recycling occurs today. We are the international organization in the ILO that, together with the World Health Organizations on the other side of the street, have been mandated by our 187 member states, by our employers, constituency and worker constituency, to improve safety and health in all sectors of the economy. In all the old economies and all the new economies, circular economy, the digital economy, the care economy. And just recently, safety and health at work, or the right to a safe and healthy working environment, was elevated to become a fundamental principle and right at work. So just like there should be no child labor, there should be no slavery at work, there should be no discrimination, so everyone has a right to a safe and healthy working environment. It gives new wind in our sail across the globe to protect the safety and health of all, including and especially those in hazardous conditions in the circular economy. So for instance, 3 years ago, ILO and IFC made a partnership in India, where we developed, not here in Geneva, but by going to India and being at the workplace together with the e-waste dismantlers. We documented what they were doing with photos. They told us what they were doing, what their work entailed. And then we turned that into checklists for how they could protect themselves from the dust, from the toxins in the air, from the fumes, how they could organize their work so that it became less hazardous, and which engineering and administrative controls they could put in place. And finally, what practical personal protective equipment they could use. And in the places where we piloted it, first of all, we saw an improvement in the safety and health performance. We also saw an increase in productivity. So it's a win-win situation. We know it works, now we just have to do it so much more. I'm a very practical person. I do a lot of preaching for the UN, but I like practical solutions. And if there's one entry point where we can make a difference in the circular economy today, it's exactly what you mentioned with your question. It's to make sure that those who go to work each day and recycle or repurpose, dismantle or reuse what we throw away, that their lives, their work, their health is protected. With that, I'm taking up way too much what's called wavelengths or airspace. You're journalists, you know how important it is to give everyone a voice in the room. So I will now retreat a little bit in the background, but be here with you and listen to your questions and help answer them. But for the sake of time, I hope you will allow us to hand it over to Luke, maybe for a high-level executive presentation, Luke, so there's also time for Jana, who's joined us today.
Awesome. Let's go to Luke now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
So I'll just share my screen with you now. Is that okay?
And see it.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much to Casper for the introduction. So my name is Luke. I'm a junior technical officer at the ILO, and I work with Casper on the circular economy and recycling here. So I just want to give a presentation today on advancing decent work in the circular economy that addresses decent work from kind of three dimensions. Firstly, the quantitative dimension, so job creation. Secondly, the qualitative dimensions, so the quality of those jobs and ensuring that we're creating decent job opportunities. And thirdly, then the importance of skills, because skills will have a key role as part of the transition to a circular economy. So kind of looking at circularity and the transition, there's three elements to it. There's the environmental, the economic, and the social. So certainly for the environmental and economic, I think there's two very clear prima facie reasons for this transition. So as it states there, we're currently living in a take, make, dispose linear model of production and consumption. So we're living beyond our means, we're living beyond natural capacities, and you can see there only 9% of our world is circular. So let's just take waste disposal, for example. Currently worldwide, we're only recycling about 13.5% of what we produce, and another 5 or 6% we're composting. So there's huge scope for growth there. There's huge scope to tackle pollution, excess waste, not just in terms of maybe waste management, which is one traditional kind of area we focus on in the circular economy, but also when it comes to the reuse of items and the prolonging the material of items too. Secondly, then we have the economic aspect. So we estimate that there's clear economic benefits for transitioning to circularity. So the European Commission places a figure on it of a 68 euro billion gain. So that would be the difference to Africa's GDP in 2030 under a circular economy scenario, versus a business as usual scenario. And the ILO then estimates that we can create a net 7 to 8 million jobs as part of the transition to circularity. But of course, as we've touched upon, there are a lot of issues existing already in the circular economy, and we don't want to just create new jobs. We want to make sure that these are decent jobs that address the social dimension of people's lives too. So looking at the impact then of the transition to circularity on employment, there's 4 ways that we'll see the creation, destruction of new jobs. So firstly, we'll have job creation. So new circular economic activities will increase the demand for labor in some sectors and create entirely new jobs. We'll have job substitution. So some employment opportunities will shift from traditional linear services to more circular services. So one example, for instance, is in textiles and clothing sales. So traditionally, purchase an item, dispose of it when you're done, but we see new circular business models whereby people are actually now leasing clothing. So we'll also witness job elimination. So there'll be no direct replacement for certain types of employment. For instance, the mining sector, although a lot of the skills in that sector are transferable, we'll see a lot of job destruction as people are reusing raw materials. And lastly, then we'll see job transformation and redefinition. So many jobs that exist already in the linear economy will be tweaked or redefined towards circularity. And so we'll require reskilling and upskilling of workers, both for those whose jobs would be transformed, but also for those who face job elimination and are looking to transfer to new jobs in the circular economy. So looking then at the sectoral changes on employment due to the transition, you can see here that sectors that rely more heavily on raw materials or more linear are going to see a decrease in employment. And these estimates are from the ILO from our 2018 report, and they apply to a circular economy scenario model for 2030. So we see a significant increase under the circular economy scenario we've modeled in the use of renewable energy, so a significant increase in employment in that sector, and also waste disposal. So as we move more towards the composting, recycling, and more environmentally positive disposal and reuse of material, we'll see significant job increases in that sector. And then when we look at employment by region, we see significant variation too. So we anticipate significant growth due to this transition in the Americas. You can see here that in Africa and the Asia Pacific region, the ILO estimates that the transition will actually have the effect of suppressing employment in these regions. And that's because of the sectoral composition of each region. So in Africa, for instance, which is more heavily reliant on mining, where more jobs are expected to be destroyed, without a global approach, the transition to circularity and inclusive approach, there is the potential for job losses. Whereas by comparison, the Americas will see significant growth in waste management, and we can see some growth as well in Europe, and that's because of a first mover advantage, because significant investment has been made previously in the circular economy policy in Europe. But of course, that's just one estimate. So there's still a great degree of uncertainty as to how this transition will unfold. And like any estimate, it's based on certain assumptions. So we have another report then from the European Commission, which actually predicts a 2.7% increase in employment in Africa by 2030. So that's some 11 million jobs being created as a result of the transition. So I think what's kind of important to grasp is not so much the kind of small net loss or gain, but the overall scale of the transition itself. So the ILO foresees 71 million jobs being destroyed and about 78 million being created. So behind those net increase or decrease figures, regardless of what region, what sector, we are seeing a huge change, a sea change in employment. And underneath that sea change of employment, then underneath those numbers, we're looking to address various aspects with regards to decent work. So one significant element of the transition to circularity is the gender dimension of work. So we estimate that the transition will actually have a net positive gain for women workers. So you can see that 24 million jobs will be created for women and 12 million destroyed. 54 created for men and 59 destroyed. So that gender rebalance will actually come not just from an increase in employment for women, but also in a net decrease in employment for men. But there's various other dimensions, not just in terms of job creation and destruction, but imbalances that exist within the circular economy regarding gender. So often women workers occupy lower, less paid rungs in the circular economy. So if you look at waste disposal, for instance, many of the people you'll see on streets working on landfills will be women. And then when they go to sell their goods to a wholesaler or a collector or a middleman, that's often a man who's higher up the chain, is able to add more value to goods and is able to earn a higher salary. So informality will be another significant issue too, and that's something we're looking to tackle. So one estimate with regards to waste management and recycling, which of course constitutes a significant number of jobs in the circular economy, puts about 80% of workers working in informality. So we have roughly 4 million people working in the formal waste management recycling sector, and another 20 million people working primarily as informal waste pickers. That has issues, or that has a effects then on working conditions. So informal workers are more likely to work in hazardous conditions, and they're less likely to be able to access social protection. It can hinder social mobility. Informality as well can also hinder productivity. The issue of kind of vulnerable groups as well, and particular challenges they face, is also something that's highly present in the circular economy. So if we look to Cairo, for instance, in Egypt, where waste management disposal has often been carried out by minority Coptic Christian groups who live in extreme situations of poverty. But across different countries, we see waste management in particular tends to be dominated by more recent migrant groups or certain minority, ethnic or religious communities. And they tend to be boxed off in these jobs as well, with little opportunity for mobility to more higher value, higher paying jobs. And lastly then, skills will play a significant role in the circular economy, which I'll touch on just slightly later in the presentation. So if we're looking to visualize the different challenges and opportunities that exist across the value chain, they differ with regards to the location. So those involved in the initial stages of the value chain, with regards to material, food supply chains, often we see a lack of social protection because many of those workers are informal, for instance, and we'll see a need for reskilling as many of those jobs will be destroyed as less materials are used. Moving on then to the manufacturing stage, we'll have transition to new circular products, circular models. So again, we'll need social protection to cushion those workers who might be displaced. And we'll also see occupational health and safety concerns as new ways of manufacturing, new operations emerge. And already we do see a lot of concerns regarding occupational health and safety in the circular economy, in processing and manufacturing too, both informal and in informal work. So next then, with regards to distribution and use, again, we are seeing social protection concerns as we develop these new, maybe more platform-focused business models. So often people are self-employed working on platforms, be they circular sharing platforms or the provision of services. They don't have access to social protection as a result. Occupational health and safety concerns too exist. And then lastly, at the end of life, again, where we see the disposal of material, we have the issues that I touched on earlier with regards to social protection, minority groups, women workers, low pay and poor safety conditions. So lastly then, just to address the issue of skills, they play a significant role in ensuring that we transition successfully to a circular economy in a way that realizes the job opportunities that exist and in a way that can realize better job opportunities. So for the large majority of occupations affected by the transition, jobs will be lost in one industry, but they'll actually be matched by equivalent jobs in a new industry. And as we said, there'll be a net creation of jobs then above and beyond those that can be filled by reallocation. But some jobs will be destroyed without vacancies opening up. So that poses a risk for some workers who will need to avail of various reskilling programs. And in the meantime, we want to support and cushion those workers via access to social protection. And we also want to see the utilization of active labour market policies to keep those workers engaged. So that kind of concludes just a few kind of key issues that we'll see as part that we'll have to address as part of the transition. So I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Thank you so very much, Luke, for your presentation. We'll open the floor for anyone who may want to ask a question. I'll make an intervention. Any takers? All righty. Luke, looks like your presentation was okay. You have Glenn here wanting to make an intervention. Yeah, you can have one here. Sorry. Take away.
Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me, Luke?
All good.
I don't know if you can see me. I'm walking around the table at the back. Glenn Wilson from UNCTAD. I just had a question around, as jobs around the creation, around jobs such as litter pickers, for example, or plastic pickers, jobs at the moment minority groups are often doing. You mentioned the Coptic Christians in Cairo. As these jobs might become more formalized and better paid, is there a risk of these marginalized groups being pushed out of these jobs by other groups that now are more attracted to these jobs because they're better paid and have better conditions? And so we're negatively affecting these minority groups that are already in a bad situation. They're now being pushed to the margins. They're remaining on the margins as such. Is there a risk of that? I feel like there might be. And how can we manage that risk?
Absolutely, there is a risk, and it's something that can occur and has occurred quite easily and quite readily without any active intervention. So the example in Cairo, for instance, we've seen some of these Coptic Christian workers previously were actually pushed out. And this can occur particularly where work is handed out to private contractors. We've seen instances of that before, who then don't incorporate these informal workers into the system. And of course, they're already at a disadvantage. We'll say they might a lot of these informal workers lack access to skills and education. So it's easier for workers from other sectors or from elsewhere to come in and simply take the jobs unless we don't take active steps to incorporate them. So there's a few ways we can do that. One is via small or micro enterprises, another via cooperatives. There are two methods that have been used. So in Buenos Aires, for example, cooperatives were successfully used to bring informal workers together, to move them towards formality and to get them working in a more productive fashion. And once they were working then at a critical mass, employers or the municipal authorities were actually able to issue out contracts and incorporate these cooperative groups in the processing of waste. Also, similarly can be done by the creation of micro enterprises. So I think it's key at the outset when municipal authorities are looking to improve waste collection practices that they factor in these informal workers. Otherwise, they risk creating, maybe tackling one environmental concern, but creating another social issue.
Thank you.
All right, Luke, thank you very
One
much.
question. Just a question. Yes, my name is Henry. I'm a journalist in Kenya. You've talked about that skills plays a significant role in circular economy. So maybe you could elaborate, which skills do you mean? Which types of skills are these?
Yep. So it's a huge variety, but kind of just to take it from a more top level approach, firstly, we anticipate that with the transition to circularity, we'll see a greater need for soft skills, firstly. So we're going to see a greater use of services and related employment with regards to the reuse of materials. So the development of soft skills will be important. The ILO has also published material on future skills needs as part of the transition to a green economy, and not just with regards to circularity, but the economy as a whole. We're going to see an increasing need for basic knowledge of environmental concerns, how that can impact businesses, and education also, and skills knowledge around waste management and disposal. But then with regards to maybe a lot of the kind of traditional manufacturing related skills, a lot of those can simply be reutilized within the new economy, and it might simply be a case of getting workers up to pace on new equipment or new machinery that they might have already used something similar or utilized a similar skill in a previous more linear job, we'll say.
I have a question. Talking of skills, what can higher learning institutions do to ensure that the education being offered in such institutions will help youths and those who are learning to gain skills for the circular economy?
So firstly, just to say, I think before we even get to universities and higher education institutions, there's a need also to address more basic or vocational skills. So many of the skills that will be needed can actually just be taught on the job, for instance. So how to use a particular piece of machinery or a particular process in a workplace. Then we'll see kind of more mid-range skills, which can be taught through vocational education programs, or simply educational programs that are incorporated in workplaces. And then once we begin moving to universities and that kind of higher level institution, I think there's a clear need for investment with regards to kind of engineering and the design of future circular practices and products. It's not just simply the bare bones work that people are carrying out, but also equipping people with the skills to actually develop circular enterprise and circular systems.
Thanks, Luke. I think we'll go to the other part of the presentation. Okay, just speak a mic so that you can be heard well. Luke, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to hear you from ILO. My concern is a little bit very disruptive. You talk about the youth and the connection. I've not heard you talk about women, by the way. To begin with that, one of the very thought-provoking situations we're having in, let us say, sub-Saharan Africa is the rate of inclusiveness of the other gender in all you've been talking about. And it all begins with point number one, where we have a problem, not even a problem, it has become a culture now where the other gender are shying off from STEM courses. And you realize that it's STEM courses that you've highlighted you as ILO in your portfolios as the next game changer, especially in women. And in terms of plastic eradication, as well as bringing in the women in, as in circular economy, whereby ILO as a key figure, as a global community is trying to bring in women in circular economy, still the problem is the impact of STEM courses in circular economy, in plastic eradication, that is beginning from the academia side itself, and now the actualization. All we have been doing all this is the ideological side. What is the wolf at the gate or at the door is, what is the actualization of the STEM from ILO, especially in sub-Saharan Africa? Go in, Luke.
Cheers, thank you. So with regards to the kind of gender dimension of circularity, I think we touched upon a few of the issues earlier, that women tend to be lower placed within the circular economy. So they're in jobs that create less value, and they're in more hazardous jobs as well, more likely to be in situations of informality. So with regards to kind of addressing that issue, one factor is we've seen already that there will be a net increase in employment, so there'll be more opportunities for women as part of it. But of course, we don't just want to address the quantitative aspect. So we need to ensure that we're addressing particularly these areas that affect women workers. So with regards waste picking, for instance, a few ways we can tackle conditions in that sector include the organization of workers into cooperatives, the organization into MS, micro, small, and medium enterprises. Also just basic recognition in a lot of instances by municipal authorities that this work exists, and that they should engage with it, and that they should provide maybe some level of protection. One thing we've seen in particular with regards to cooperatives and social enterprises is how they can benefit women workers. So many of them will provide caregiving services. So they'll provide childcare, which can affect how many hours a woman can work. and which can affect the decisions around the hours she works as well. Also in relation to, they can also provide education opportunities too, which mightn't have been initially afforded to people, that can promote social mobility too. But I might just defer to Casper, perhaps he has a few thoughts as well with regards to more higher level policies.
Casper, your
Start
mic
mute.
is off.
Thank you, Luke. As long as we worldwide only have, of all those who start a STEM degree, 30% being women, STEM will help those women find better jobs in the circular economy, but there will still be more men with women STEM degrees that will capture these new jobs. So we have to absolutely renew our efforts across our societies, communities, our religious institutions, that, come on, women, let's work together so that you can also, more of you women, more women can pursue a STEM degree. But we also have to look in our education systems. Why is it that there is a leaky pipeline? Why is it that those women that end up with a degree, that when they go into the labor market, they tend to quit their jobs younger than men? So we also need to make sure that the jobs they end up are good jobs for women. One way of looking at it in the big picture is the key role of women in our societies and in the world of work. In our societies, it's of course the role of women as mothers, as sisters, as daughters. I myself have been extremely lucky to have the strongest women around me, right from my grandmother, who I remember dearly, and now my daughter is way smarter than I will ever be. And then if we look at the role of women in the labor market and in the circular economy, here women, and I mention this because we know deep down that things only really start to happen when women get fully involved. So we have women as consumers, right? Women have a huge role in the things they purchase and they buy for themselves and for their families. So when women and consumers start demanding circular products or products that are good for the environment, things start to shape. All of a sudden, consumer preferences and demand patterns change. Then there are women as workers and in their role as workers. There are not as many women in the labor market as there are men, unfortunately. But in the circular economy, and particularly in informal economy, there are many women involved. We need to have a special focus, as Luke said, on empowering them, including through women's cooperatives, for instance, or skills targeted to the situation of women. Then there are women in management positions, in the big recycling companies. We see women, more and more women getting on board, but mostly in sort of finance or human resources positions. It's still not widely accepted to see women as engineers, even though they are as brilliant as male engineers. So at the workplace, the management level, we can do a hell of a lot more. Then it happens in the circular economy as another areas of the economy, that there are very few women leaders, very few women CEOs or leaders in the public sector. So obviously there are glass ceilings that can and still should be shattered, because our enterprises and our public institutions will only be as good as the leaders we have. And if we don't give women a better chance than we do today, we are only tapping 1/2 of the pool, and we won't get the best. And finally, there are women as board members and as investors. And I think we and they, if we all work together in all the roles that women have, with the support of men, that's only when we have a chance to move this move the needle on this as we so rightly need. Now, concretely, in the ILO in Africa 3 months ago, we held a meeting with government representatives, employers, and workers from 10 countries across Africa in the mining sector on women in mining. It was the most powerful workshop I have seen, because when men and women come together across this highly masculine mining sector, but freely discuss ways to improve conditions for both women and men, things start to happen, and we start to get policies that really make a difference. And we have created in that meeting a network, a sisterhood of women in mining that continue to push for change today. Your question has inspired me that we need to do something like that for the circular economy sector across Africa.
Thank you so very much for that intervention as well. I think we are going now to Yana. Once again, good afternoon. Welcome to our session with Yana. And we are going to give her a chance to talk to us, to introduce herself and tell us what she is doing at the Circular Economy Foundation. And take it away. Yana, the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending this webinar and attending our presentations. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Jana Ruwe-Gluding. I'm a researcher here at Circular Economy Foundation. And after the presentation or throughout, I'm very excited to have some fruitful exchange. Today's discussion is within the context of decent work in the circular economy. So I'm going to present a little bit what the Circular Economy Foundation is, and specifically my team and what we do, and then go over from shifting from the number of jobs and that focus that has been highly emphasized to the quality of jobs in the circular economy. And then I'm going to go over the report, the decent work in the circular economy, and specifically through the lens of the regional implications that would have. And finally, just a brief discussion on the ways forward, and then open to exchange and discuss later on. If I go too fast, please tell me. So yes, the Circular Economy Foundation, I don't know if everyone knows who we are, but we're an impact organization based in Amsterdam that focuses on conducting research and advocating for a circular economy that ensures that people and the planet thrive. So the Circular Jobs Initiative specifically is within the Circular Economy Foundation. And so my team focuses on the labor market perspective on the circular economy transition and the specific interventions that we advocate or that we discuss within the broader context of circular economy transition. So more specifically, and I use our team as a case study as well to ensure the shift in discussion between just the number of jobs towards more the quality and quantity and the context of these circular economy jobs. So at CJI, the Circular Jobs Initiative, we see workers not only being employed in the circular economy sectors in which we want to promote, but also they are impacted by specific circular economy strategies. And also workers, and more broadly the labor market, will shape and determine how the circular economy transition will play out globally and in different contexts. So this is, I think, the nuance that we try to bring. So we aim to understand how the existing and future labor market relates to circular economy strategies. So we either provide specific baselines regarding the circular economy, number of circular economy jobs, the education and skills required, and the enabling conditions required for these circular economy strategies to materialize. So we are a research organization, but also we advocate to ensure that the circular economy is for the people within, essentially for the people. So we are known for our circular jobs methodology, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but essentially we're quantifying how many jobs, circular jobs, are in the labor market, and we create these baselines for cities or countries. It's a bit different than, for example, the Eurostat's approach, and I'm not going to go into it. We can discuss maybe later on if you want, But overall, we have a digital tool that you can explore more than 100 cities worldwide. It's freely available. It's called the Circular Jobs Monitor, and there are a few African cities there. So, as I said before, during our work, we increasingly saw that it's not only important to understand how many number of jobs and the distribution in the economy that is important for policymakers, but more specifically is understanding the nature and quality of these jobs become as critical in terms of for who is this economy, this new economy for, who is it working for? More specifically, as you zoom out, the circular economy jobs vary greatly in different contexts, and specifically circular economy interventions are not a one-size-fits-all. So there's more complexity in different contexts, such as, for example, the repair sector and looks much different in Europe or even in Amsterdam than it is in other contexts, such as Accra or any other city. So if we zoom out, we view that circular economy is a means to an end, the end being a safe operating space within planetary boundaries and socially just for humanity. So while the circular economy can offer an opportunity to change the way we work, it's not socially just by default. Rather, it's designed and it's not a passive outcome. And I think that's very important when we're advocating for decent work in the circular economy. What makes this transition different than other transitions in the past or even pre-existing ones? So the challenge is not only redesigning existing jobs, but also the creation of additional jobs in previously unexplored sectors, or bringing at the fore invisibilized sectors, such as the informal sector, in which our ILO colleagues already mentioned. In many contexts, to add even more complexity, it's more likely to be more labor intensive and more in sectors that are culturally less desirable. So this is more the systems approach and the challenges that places. So the large challenge is, how can we ensure circular strategies contribute to well-being within planetary boundaries? So there's clearly unintended consequences that can emerge when we adopt circular strategies that might be tackling environmental issues, but we do not understand how the local, regional, global socioeconomic implications these strategies might have. And so this is why, given this big problem statement, to address this question, we launched the Jobs in the Circular Economy, a joint initiative along with the ILO and the World Bank Solutions for Youth Employment program. And so this initiative was born out of two needs. One is to the need for better data and evidence to understand how the circular economy could lead to a more just, inclusive world. So how could circular economy reach the specific goals, social goals, and the need to identify multiple gaps in the evidence base for circular jobs through a collaborative platform with international community of researchers, industry representatives, social partners, governments, and government bodies. So collating various stakeholders that are key in moving this transition forward and shaping this transition. Oh, so is there any question? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, never mind. Tell me if I'm going too fast. So I will briefly go in the third part of the presentation, which is the outcomes of the first output of this initiative. So we first did a literature review, so collating what is already known to understand the current knowledge gaps. And so this well-being, well-being within planetary boundaries, the proxy that we use is decent work as the global framework for workers' well-being. You can download the report with a QR code if you're interested. Later on, it'll appear again. So what is the existing evidence base? It's a large report. You can read a bit more in depth if you feel like it, but given the time constraints, I'll just go over a few remarkable things that are related to the region, I think. So overall, there's growing interest. So from 1995 to 2022, there's been growing interest in circular economy and decent work. So what does that mean? We defined it that in the report, but essentially there is growing interest in understanding the social implications and the social challenges with circular economy. Yet 84% of these studies reviewed focused on the global north. And so, as everyone might know, but this is why the evidence part of, systematically reviewing that. So we have some, the global south reports largely relate to waste management. So there's a very narrow focus on what circular economy is for the global south, and that is related to waste management. So, well, anyways, and there is no research on middle income countries in the region, in the African region. And so that's interesting as well to unpack later on. And overall, most research at the macro or global level is macroeconomic modeling. So the impact of specific circular strategies on employment figures, or it's very theoretical. So advocating for specific changes at the global level, but it's still at the theoretical level. So I'm going to go, despite the report has many pillars due to time constraints and the focus of this workshop, I'll focus on 3 relevant. So labor market and sectoral transformation, working conditions and informality, and then skills development briefly. So in terms of labor market transformation, what does the evidence base say? And that would be relevant for the region is essentially the social angle is mainly quantified or observed as how many direct circular jobs, how many jobs in the circular economy are there. So that's like the socioeconomic angle that most studies are taking. There's no regional or even country level studies on job transformation or job loss. So there are some studies that focus on the EU dynamics, but not really necessarily at the African dynamics and how that relates to the broader global value chains. And I think that is, anyways, that's what we found. And specifically country levels tend to be mainly case studies. So there's no quantitative understanding of how the quantitative impact of jobs, but other aspects of beyond jobs, what other impacts are there? And there's, so yeah, that's that. Overall, there's not enough focus on the ecosystem where circular jobs are conducted, such as the supporting sectors that would allow for repair, remanufacturing, reuse. So it's very narrow, as I previously mentioned, and what a circular job is in the African context. If living in a highly intertwined economy requires a circular economy regional perspective and global north and global south collaborations and understanding those dynamics. So further understanding of the impacts of further localizing specific jobs, either in the global north or even in the global south. There's not enough research on that, and not enough research on the role of migration and how that would play a whole role, either internally or more broadly. So in terms of working conditions and informality, again, this is very summarized and related only to the regional context. We don't know how adopting more circular economy strategies, so greater circularity in a specific economy or region, will affect actually existing working conditions beyond just occupational safety and health hazards in the waste and recycling sectors. So there isn't this broad understanding of how will working conditions or other decent work aspects will be changing or adapting to different new strategies, circular strategies. Overall, circular activity is, everyone knows, is omnipresent, largely performed by the large informal economy or large informal sector, yet largely unquantified. So this is not new for anyone that is from here. So in many contexts, the informal sector has taken on activities that until recently were overlooked or undervalued, often relating to the fact that there's lack of infrastructure to meet the growing demand for specific activities such as waste management or recycling or even transportation. Overall, in the literature and the evidence, that we only know, or at least there's evidence on the global north. So we don't understand necessarily how more circularity would relate to the changing nature of the informal sector and how that creates other dynamics. Anyways, we don't know, and the existing evidence that is there is again is case studies. So it's very contextual, but it's still in a case study. So quantification becomes very challenging. And mapping, and overall, there's also this lack of mapping out where are the key circular economy sectors and how do they relate to specific other global key value chains in the region, but also more broadly globally, and how those interact with each other. And then the last point that I wanted to make was about skills development. I think my colleagues at the ILO, they already mentioned this, but the circular skills are similar challenges, face similar challenges as green skills or green jobs sectors. Mainly, there's a lack of demand for circular economy skills, and there's not enough people in critical circular economy sectors, such as repair, reuse, or even carpentry, such as like classic professions. So this is maybe more a European problem, but it's worth looking into how much of this issue is also is present in the region. In particular, the continued feminization of low value services, the service sector, and we do not know how that relates to circular economy interventions. So would women still continue being in this low value service sectors in the circular economy? Yet at the same time, there's this male dominated sectors that are threatened or will require to transition from the linear economy. That becomes an issue because how is it being dealt with at the region? This continued feminization on the one hand, but at the same time, this highly male-dominated sectors that require this transition. So this discussion is still, we did not see it in the literature, and we don't know how that's relevant for the African context or your own context. And finally, we do see, and there is in the literature that does mention a few studies actually on the how circular economy is an opportunity to address youth employment, underemployment, by localizing circular economy jobs and further incentivizing the growth of these sectors at the local level, such as repair or reuse. So apologies if I'm going a bit too fast and I'm going a bit too broad. There's many more questions that could be addressed in the QA. So in the ways forward, again, the reports and the recommendations in the report were a bit more broad because the report was much more broad. But overall, we should go beyond EU regional analysis to include a diverse set of countries, a diverse set of regions, the interaction between a specific country and region or inter-region or even global, and more broader inclusion of circular economy actors and stakeholders. That's obvious. Secondly, we need to ensure that the growing evidence base aids circular economy policymaking and impact assessments. So not only, obviously it's very important road mapping, and we completely agree on this, but it's okay, once we do the road mapping, how do we monitor? How do we monitor progress? How do we monitor social outcomes? And what is the implications of these policies essentially that we're developing? And finally, the call for action is we need more joint advocacy and data knowledge partnerships globally, regionally, and locally. And I think, journalists here play a critical role in this. So without further ado, I don't know if I'm on time or not. Here you can download the report. Here's the QR code. And yeah, you can explore more of our digital tools or more of our reports that we've done in the past in our website. And overall, thank you so much for having us. Well, having me in this sense. And I'm looking forward to any questions.
All right, let's appreciate Yana.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. We are going to have a few questions for you and for the team as well. And as well, in the next few minutes, ask for like your final statements. But I just want to ask you to start with, I think you mentioned that there is a digital circular economy tool that is used to like, I would think it's used to measure like what is the level of every other regional country. Is it here in Africa? In which countries is it available? Is data available for the tool? So how can we interact with it?
Yes, so I can share the link later on if you want, but essentially we partnered, the methodology is essentially like circular jobs methodology is was co-developed with UNEP and we're improving it as the time goes on. And circular jobs monitor is basically showing how how many jobs are in a specific city or country that we consider circular jobs. So you can see like 5% of the economy has circular jobs essentially. And you can find, I think at least 7 cities from the African region. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to know whether it's something that we can be able to interact with.
Oh, yes, yes. Interact in the sense you can play around and you can go into different levels and see how much repair, how many people are employed in the repair sector in Accra, for example.
Is it part of the materials that you shared with us? The ones that you have?
I think so, but if not, I can share again.
Okay.
Or you can even see how much of the public sector is being is participant in the circular economy space. And there's a specific percentage and we do input-output table as our method.
All right, thank you. So for colleagues here, we have a number of links that were provided on today's session. If you go to the webpage, we have a number of links that Julian provided, and I hope this is one of them. If it's not, let's just interact with that, and then we can ask Julian to link us with that. And for the speakers this afternoon as well, they are available for interaction with you if you want to reach out. I know it's the International Labour Organization is quite important because when you're talking about jobs and decent jobs, and talking about decent jobs, I wanted to ask, and I think either of you can answer this. How do you measure, what is the measure of a decent job? Because, you know, like even life expectancies in different countries, depending on how, you know, the local environments are. What is a decent job in the circular economy specifically?
Should I answer, or Casper or Luke, would you like to answer, given that the ILO has that framework?
Thank you. So a decent job is one in which women and men can pursue opportunities for work in conditions of dignity and freedom, respect. A decent job is generally a job that is well paid at certainly a living wage in conditions of work that have been set out in international labor standards. For instance, that there are limits of the hours of work that should be worked per day or per week. It was the ILO who introduced the 48-hour work week, which in many countries have been lowered to 40 hours. A decent job is also one in which you have access to employment injury protection or insurance, and that gives you access to social protection systems. A decent job is also one that allows you to be a member of a union and where everyone has equal opportunities for promotion or for training. Let me ask you, could those of you who enjoy these minimum requirements of a decent job raise your hand? So I see no hands. Wow, we have. Listen, I'm actually not surprised because my colleague just down the hall, He's an expert in the situation of the working conditions in the media, arts, and entertainment sector, including the working conditions of journalists. So we are very carefully monitoring working conditions in the media sector. And of course, it's a grave concern that around the world, more and more journalists are receiving threats. Death threats, online threats, threats against families. You have probably come across people who don't like what you have written, and then they decide to send you death threats. It's just crazy what's going on. But more and more, there's also concerns about the fact that many journalist contracts or media contracts seems to be short-term. There's very little job security in some outlets. And I've been a journalist myself. You can certainly forget about regular working hours when you're a journalist. So I just want to say that a decent job is, of course, an ideal and an aspiration. What I hope most of you take home is certainly a pay, and that you can have an income that will make sure that you can live, and you can make sure that your family is safe and your children, if you have any, can go to school. Not many people in the circular economy enjoys those kind of working conditions and such benefits today.
All right, thank you, Caspar, for your intervention. I want to give a chance to either of our colleagues who will have a question for you. And also now, as we get those final questions, we can also be thinking about your closing, a very brief closing statement for each of you. Thank you very much for your time. So we are almost going to the end of it. Anyone with a question that you want addressed? Victor.
It's a general question. I don't know who can answer it, but mine is that I've been listening to the presentations from morning out this time. It's like this issue of circular economy and the youth. It has liberated the youth and women so much than the older men, and also the part of maybe training. You see, some of the things, these things are new to some of us. Some of the countries, they don't know on how to do it. So I don't know, is there any framework which has been put in place to make sure that there's a training when it's being introduced in a certain country? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I can start and colleagues can complement me. There are some broader frameworks.
Let's take another question and then you can take them all. I hope you can just note them down and then we'll...
Will do, certainly. Thank you.
Sure. Abuja.
This goes to Jean. In his presentation, he said that between 1995 and 2022, around 30,000, more than 30,000 academic papers were found on circular economy, but only 1.4 addressed the decent work issue. Now, what is his take on that discrepancy? What does it translate to in terms of decent work in the circular economy? Thank you.
Albert. I'd like to also find out from you what you term this where used electronic gadgets are shipped down to Africa and only a fraction of it is repaired by artisans, and the rest found itself either in the ocean, polluting the soil, fertile soil and other things. Is that a circular economy? Or how do you term it?
All right, we are good to go. Let's get on those ones.
So let me start. There are several frameworks also in Africa to promote awareness and understanding of the circular economy. There's the Africa Circular Economy Network and the Africa Circular Economy Alliance. And then in a growing number of African countries, we see the adoption of circular economy action plans. I think it's fair to say that it's still very much in its infancy, which is exactly why we need pioneers and ambassadors like you to spread the awareness and understanding of circular economy as a viable model to addressing climate change and addressing the decent work deficits. In the ILO, we offer some training. Every year we have a circular economy training course, where we also have some stipends for participants to join. So if you'd like to know more about that, it'll be in the autumn next year only. You can contact Luke and me. We can also consider doing training or webinars online or at the country level, but for the moment we do not have anything specific planned now. But we do have, and we will have next year, a training course in Turin, Italy, on decent work in the circular economy. Maybe over to you, Jana.
Yeah, sounds good. In relation to the 1.4% of the all papers in scope that focused on circular economy, I mean, this is, yeah, there's not enough emphasis. Decent work in the circular economy is definitely a niche. A lot of people talk about it, but not necessarily do anything about it. No, so I think that's where the initiative came into play, but more specifically to start creating robust evidence, no, to really start, instead of hearsay discussions, we could already say this is the quantitatively and qualitatively how what the challenges are at the structural level. But yes, I mean, and the sad part is that of the 400, like the 1.4% includes academic papers, but also gray literature, so like policy reports and so on. So it's a bit grim. Apologies for that.
Finally, to your question of electronic waste being shipped to Africa and dumped in Africa, we actually had a whole presentation on this that Luke had made. Maybe we can share it with you online. Apart from ship recycling, e-waste is also the area where we in the ILO we work the most. To answer your question, what you described is unfortunately the way the circular economy looks today. And it's the worst part of the circular economy today, and it should not be the circular economy of the future. The open air landfill in Ghana, Akbogloshi, is the world's most toxic dump. It's the most dangerous place to be because you're surrounded by toxins, and most of them are chemicals from e-waste that have been dumped there in the open. And that's exactly what should not happen. It's now being covered over. What should happen is what Ghana, by presidential decree, have done, which is the president has enacted a levy on all used electronic equipment that flows into the country. And with that levy, he has built an e-waste, Ghana has built an e-waste facility financed by that levy that today takes any incoming e-waste that is allowed to enter the country and turns it into valuable raw materials, and that can be reused for manufacturing or other purposes. The model is not working perfectly, but it's a big, big step in the right direction to making sure that the circular economy actually protects the planet and protects the people.
So you mentioned the circular economy training course. I want to know how that course, you make sure that that course goes down to the artisans in that industry, in the circular economy industry. Because in Ghana, I just realized we have a very huge circular economy industry. We have artisans who repair phones, and so when your phone gets spoiled, you don't just throw it away. You make sure you repair it for at least 2-3 times before you throw it away. We have tailors or seamstresses who sew your clothes when they are torn so you don't throw it away. We have repairers who repair your electronic gadgets when they are spoiled.
Yes.
And so, but if you're training just journalists or people at the top, then those people do not even understand their role in the system. So how do they also benefit from this, these kind of training so that they appreciate themselves better? Thank you.
No, absolutely. I'm so glad you make that important point. What we will be working on in Expanion, amongst other things, is a global tool on advancing decent work in recycling. But then with colleagues in the ILO office in Abuja, which also covers not only Nigeria, but also Ghana, we are working towards very simple but very powerful tool to improve safety and health of e-waste workers. So that is a very concrete tool and a very concrete place to start to improve the lives and work of people that dismantle, recycle, repurpose electronics. We have then developed a tool in the ILO called the Sustainable and Competitive Enterprises Tool, or SCORE, which has a whole module on circularity. This is for owners of SMEs, how they can become more circular, or how circular SMEs can become more productive and competitive. We're not the only ones with tools like these. They are early days. For instance, the Africa Circular Economy Alliance I spoke about earlier, they are particularly focuses on enterprises and SMEs and their owners, and how to make circular SMEs in Africa more competitive, more productive, and safer. We need much more. Everyone has to chip in, because what we're up against is, I think what you alluded to, it's systemic change. And we're really only at the start of this, because as you said, most of those in power, the circular economy is not even on their radar. And we know that to facilitate change, for people to change, human beings to change, we first need to be aware of the problem. Then we need to accept it. And then we need to accept that there will be solutions and come up with specific actions. And of that awareness, acceptance, action curve, we're really only at the exception stage. And that's why it's so important for you to please help spread the message. Cover the story of those who dismantle, cover the story of the female entrepreneur, cover the story of the policymaker in Ghana who did something else. I'll show you a video we did where we tried to we call it policy heroes, where we try to celebrate those who are taking action to inspire others, but also cover the problems, cover what you see, and to raise the awareness of your readers and of the excellent change makers in Africa. Luke?
Just to add as well that we've also developed a tool for promoting safety and health in e-waste management, and previously as well published material in relation to waste management and recycling. So I'd be happy to share those as well along with the SCORE program after this presentation.
All right. Thank you so very much, Luke, Yana, and Caspar, for your time, for your presentations. And I hope you're also available just in case any of our colleagues, journalists, wants to reach out for any clarifications or for any interviews, for any quotes that they may want to bring you in. I know labor is a very important topic around the world, because in most cases why every government is elected to power is so that they can come and at least provide kind of a decent wage to their people. In most cases, that is not happening, and we hope that ILO is going to help many people manage that, and also make it a decent wage for many people, because a decent wage is more important than just a wage, because very many people are working, but they are not reaping the benefits of their jobs. So thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for
thank you, Tuki. Thank you, Julian, for inviting us. Thank you to the colleagues in UNCTAD, but most of all, thank you to you participants for surviving the graveyard spot with us, and being with us on the journey to India and back, and around the world. Indeed, our world is one beautiful circle when you look at it from space, one beautiful sphere. So let's do all we can to protect it and increase circularity and decent work for everyone on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so very much for your time. And asante sana. Let's appreciate all of them.
Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Karibuni sana. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so with that, we come to the end of our event today. That is day 2 of our event. And like I said just a few minutes ago, we have a number of links that have been provided for us on, on the